Elena Vasquez stepped off the transport shuttle onto the polished metal deck of the Imperial recruitment station, her worn military duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The massive space station hummed with activity as beings from dozens of species moved through the corridors. Tall, elegant Altarians with their silver skin glided past short, stocky Corvani miners. Multi-armed Thessian traders gestured wildly as they conducted business in the central plaza. Elena kept her eyes forward, ignoring the curious stares her human form attracted. Humans were still relatively new to the Galactic Empire, having only made contact 3 years ago. Most aliens had never seen one up close, and she could feel their gazes following her compact frame and the rifle case strapped to her back. The recruitment office was a sprawling complex filled with testing chambers, medical bays, and interview rooms. Elena approached the main desk where a bored-looking Zenthari clerk sat behind a holographic display. The lizard-like being barely glanced up from his screen. "Species and purpose of visit," the clerk hissed in accented Galactic standard. "Human. Military recruitment," Elena replied in the same language, her pronunciation crisp despite her Earth accent. The Zenthari's eyes widened slightly. He tapped several commands into his console before looking up at her with renewed interest. "A human seeking military service? That's unusual. Most of your species prefer civilian roles or trade positions." Elena shrugged. "I'm not most humans." The clerk handed her a datapad containing dozens of forms. "Complete these and report to Testing Bay 7. Fair warning, human. The Imperial military doesn't coddle new recruits. The mortality rate during basic training alone is 15%. "I'll take my chances," Elena said, accepting the pad. She found an empty bench in the waiting area and began filling out the extensive paperwork. Name, species, homeworld, previous military experience. When she reached the section asking about combat specializations, she paused for a moment before checking the box marked Precision Marksman Sniper. An hour later, Elena stood in Testing Bay 7 alongside 24 other recruits. The group was diverse. A hulking Corvani warrior who looked like he could bench press a shuttle, 3 quick-moving Rillian scouts with their characteristic feathered crests, and several others from species she didn't recognize. The testing officer was a battle-scarred Altarian named Commander Thex. His silver skin bore the ritual markings of a veteran, and his pale blue eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had seen too much combat. "Listen carefully, recruits," Thex announced in a voice that carried absolute authority. "You will face 3 challenges today: physical combat assessment, tactical analysis, and weapons proficiency. Fail any one of these, and you'll be on the next transport home." The physical combat assessment came first. Elena watched as the other recruits faced off against training, drones programmed to match their species' typical combat patterns. The Corvani crushed his opponents with brute force. The Rillians used speed and agility to overwhelm their targets. When Elena's turn came, whispers rippled through the group. "The little human thinks she can fight," one of the Rillians chittered to his companion. Elena stepped into the combat ring and drew her plasma knife. The training drones activated, their red sensors scanning her form before adjusting their programming. 3 medium-sized combat units approached from different angles, moving with mechanical precision. Instead of meeting them head-on, Elena did something unexpected. She threw her knife at the leftmost drone, the blade spinning through the air to strike its sensor cluster. As the drone stumbled blind, she rolled forward and grabbed its plasma rifle. 2 quick shots disabled the remaining attackers. The room fell silent. Commander Thex made a note on his datapad without changing expression. The tactical analysis test presented holographic battle scenarios requiring quick thinking and strategic planning. Elena found herself working through complex multi-species combat situations, accounting for the strengths and weaknesses of different alien physiologies. Her years studying Earth military history gave her insights that pure alien military doctrine couldn't provide. Finally came weapons proficiency testing. Elena's pulse quickened as they moved to the firing range. This was her element. She opened her rifle case to reveal a modified, Earth-designed precision rifle that she had personally upgraded with Galactic Empire technology. "Interesting weapon," Commander Thex observed, studying the hybrid design. Earth firearms adapted with Imperial energy systems. Did you modify this yourself? Yes, sir. Combines the best of both technologies. The shooting course was designed to challenge even experienced marksmen. Targets appeared at various distances, some moving erratically, others partially concealed behind cover. The maximum range extended to nearly 2 kilometers in the station's longest corridor. Elena took her position and began the assessment. Her first shot rang out, striking a target at 800 meters. The second hit a moving target at 1,200 meters. By her fifth shot, the other recruits had stopped their own tests to watch. Shot after shot found its mark with mechanical precision. Targets that other species struggled to hit even with computer assistance fell to Elena's unassisted shooting. When the test concluded, she had achieved a perfect score on every target, including several that the testing system had marked as extremely difficult for baseline organic shooters. Commander Thex approached her position, studying the results on his scanner with obvious disbelief. These scores, they're higher than most of our enhanced marksmen achieve. Have you undergone genetic modification or cybernetic enhancement? No, sir. Standard human baseline. That's impossible. Humans don't possess the visual acuity or neural processing speed to achieve these results. Elena dismantled her rifle with practiced efficiency, returning it to its case. Perhaps your data on human capabilities is incomplete, Commander. The Altarians studied her for a long moment. Around them, the other recruits whispered among themselves in various alien languages. Elena caught fragments of their conversations, expressions of disbelief, accusations of equipment tampering, and more than a few comments about impossible human performance. Report to Medical Bay 3 for enhanced screening, Thex finally ordered. If these results are legitimate, you'll be fast-tracked to advanced training. As Elena left the testing bay, she overheard one of the Rillian recruits speaking to his companion in their native language. Thanks to her linguistic training, she understood every word. No baseline organic should shoot that accurately. Either she's enhanced or she's using illegal assistance technology. Elena smiled grimly to herself. They had no idea what humans were truly capable of when pushed to their limits. The Galactic Empire was about to learn that their assumptions about her species were dangerously incomplete. The medical bay would find nothing unusual about her physiology. What they couldn't measure was 20 years of dedicated training, the genetic lottery that had given her exceptional hand-eye coordination, and the burning determination of someone who had lost everything on Earth and was looking for a new purpose among the stars. The Empire thought they were recruiting just another alien soldier. They were about to discover they had found something much more dangerous, a human with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. 3 weeks later, Elena found herself aboard the military transport Stellar Conquest, bound for the Imperial War College on Nexus Prime. The ship carried 200 newly accepted recruits from across the galaxy, all heading for advanced military training. Elena's perfect scores had indeed earned her a fast-track placement, much to the confusion of her alien instructors. She kept to herself during the journey, spending most of her time in the ship's small library studying Galactic Empire military doctrine and alien physiology. The other human recruits, there were only 12 total, had been assigned to engineering and support roles. None had qualified for combat positions, making Elena's placement even more unusual. On the third day of travel, she encountered her first real problem. A group of Corvani recruits had decided that the little human needed to be put in her proper place. They cornered her in one of the ship's maintenance corridors. Away from security cameras and potential witnesses, human, the largest Corvani growled, his rocky hide scarred from countless battles on his homeworld. You think your trick shooting makes you a warrior? Elena sized up her opponents. 5 Corvani, each standing nearly 2.5 meters tall and massing at least twice her weight. Their species had evolved on a high-gravity world where survival meant constant physical confrontation. They were natural fighters, with skin like stone armor and strength that could crush most other species without effort. I think my test scores speak for themselves, Elena replied calmly, positioning herself with her back to the corridor wall. The lead Corvani laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. Tests mean nothing. Real combat is different. On the battlefield, when the shooting starts, you weak humans always break first. Your species has been in the Empire for what, 50 years? Elena asked conversationally. How many major conflicts have you actually fought in? The question caught them off guard. The truth was that the Corvani, despite their reputation as warriors, had largely fought in ceremonial conflicts and border skirmishes. The Empire's overwhelming technological superiority meant that most wars ended before ground combat became necessary. That's not the point, another Corvani snarled. We know what real fighting looks like, do you? Elena stepped forward, completely unintimidated by their size advantage. Because where I come from, we've been fighting wars for our entire recorded history. My species has perfected killing in ways you've never imagined. She pulled out her personal datapad and brought up a holographic display. Images filled the corridor, Earth's bloodiest battlefields. Statistics from wars that had claimed millions of lives. Tactical innovations born from desperate necessity. While your people were fighting honor duels with traditional weapons, my species developed industrialized warfare. We've used everything from poison gas to nuclear weapons to biological plagues. We've fought in trenches, in cities, in space, and underwater. We've killed each other with such efficiency that we've had to create international laws just to limit how creative we could get with mass murder. The Corvani stared at the images in growing shock, scenes of devastation that made their ceremonial conflicts look like children's games. This is propaganda, the leader finally stammered. No species could survive this level of self-destruction. We didn't just survive it, Elena said quietly. We thrived on it. Every major technological advancement my species has made came from trying to find better ways to kill each other. Our medical science exists because we needed to patch up soldiers. Our computers exist because we needed to calculate artillery trajectories. Our space program exists because we needed better ways to deliver warheads. She closed the display and looked each Corvani in the eye. So when you question whether I can handle combat, remember that I come from a species that has spent the last 5,000 years perfecting the art of organized violence. Your people fight for honor, mine fight to win no matter the cost. The Corvani exchanged uncertain glances. Their whole worldview was built around the idea that physical strength determined combat effectiveness. The concept of a species that had weaponized creativity and turned war into a science was alien to them. You're trying to scare us with stories, one of them said, but his voice lacked conviction. Elena smiled, and something in that expression made all 5 aliens take an involuntary step backward. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm explaining why the Empire's testing protocols don't account for human capabilities. You see weakness because I'm small. You see inexperience because my species is new to galactic warfare. What you're not seeing is 3 million years of evolution that produced the most successful predator my world has ever known. She gestured to the corridor around them. This ship, this technology, this entire empire. It's all designed around the assumption that superior technology makes physical conflict obsolete. But technology fails. Equipment breaks. When that happens, what matters is which species has spent longer learning how to kill efficiently. The tension in the corridor was thick enough to cut. Elena could see the Corvani processing her words, their simple worldview crashing against the reality of human history. They had expected an easy intimidation, maybe a quick fight to establish dominance. Instead, they had found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about combat. Besides, Elena added casually, if you really want to test whether humans break under pressure, you should know that this conversation is being recorded by my personal combat log. Imperial regulations require all threatening encounters to be documented for review by superior officers. The Corvani leader's eyes widened. If Elena filed a complaint about intimidation, it could derail their military careers before they even reached the war college. This isn't over. Human, he growled, but the threat was hollow now. Actually, it is, Elena replied. Because in 3 days we'll all be at the War College where our performance will be evaluated by people who care about results, not posturing. I'm looking forward to showing you what human weakness looks like in practice. As the Corvani filed out of the corridor, Elena allowed herself a small smile. She had avoided a physical confrontation that could have ended badly for everyone involved. More importantly, she had begun the psychological warfare that would be crucial to her success in the Imperial military. The Empire saw humans as weak because they measured strength in the wrong ways. They looked at physical capabilities and technological advancement, missing the most important factor: adaptability under pressure. Humans had spent millennia learning to survive in situations where they were outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched. They had turned disadvantage into an art form. Word of the corridor encounter spread quickly through the ship's recruit population. Elena found herself the subject of hushed conversations and speculative stares. Some recruits seemed nervous around her, while others appeared openly curious about what else humans might be capable of. She didn't discourage the speculation. Reputation was a weapon, and she intended to use every advantage available when she reached the War College. The Empire thought they were getting a marksman with unusual accuracy. They were about to discover they had recruited something much more dangerous. A human who understood that war was as much about psychology as it was about firepower. The remaining days of the journey passed without incident, but Elena could feel the weight of expectation building. At the War College, she would face challenges designed to break recruits from species that had been part of the Empire for generations. She would be tested against standards created by beings who had never encountered human ingenuity under pressure. They were expecting her to fail, and that was exactly the advantage she needed. The Imperial War College on Nexus Prime was a fortress world designed to forge the galaxy's elite soldiers. Massive training complexes stretched across continents, each specialized for different forms of warfare. Elena stood with her fellow recruits in the central plaza, watching senior students demonstrate advanced combat techniques with casual ease. Colonel Varix, their Thessian commanding officer, addressed the new arrivals with forearms gesturing in precise military patterns. His species was known for their tactical brilliance, and his reputation as a trainer was legendary throughout the Empire. "You are no longer the best from your homeworlds," Varix announced, his multiple eyes scanning the assembled recruits. "Here you will discover what true military excellence demands. 60% of you will wash out within the first month. Of those who remain, only 20% will achieve advanced placement in Imperial Special Forces." Elena listened as Varix outlined the training program. Physical conditioning that would push alien physiologies to their absolute limits. Tactical simulations based on real conflicts across the galaxy. Technology training on weapon systems that some species had been developing for centuries. Combat scenarios designed to test everything from individual initiative to large-scale coordination. "Your first assessment begins now," Varix continued. "You will be divided into squads of 8 and given a tactical scenario. Success requires every squad member to contribute according to their species' capabilities. Failure means immediate review for dismissal." Elena found herself assigned to Squad Theta, a deliberately mixed unit designed to test interspecies cooperation. Her squad mates included 2 Rillian scouts, a Corvani heavy weapons specialist, an Altarian technician, a Zenthari communications expert, a Vorthan pilot, and surprisingly, a Nexari strategy coordinator. The Nexari were the Empire's newest member species, having joined only 6 months ago. They were known for their extraordinary analytical capabilities, able to process multiple complex scenarios simultaneously. Elena's squad mate introduced himself as Coordinator Zeth, his elongated skull marked with the neural interface ports that his species used to enhance their already formidable mental abilities. "I have studied the limited data available on human capabilities," Zeth said as they reviewed their first mission briefing. "Your species appears to possess unusual adaptability parameters." "That's one way to put it," Elena replied, reading through the tactical scenario. They were tasked with infiltrating a defended position, gathering intelligence, and extracting without alerting the defenders. It was a classic special operations mission, the kind that required each species to contribute their natural strengths. The Rillians, Kira and Vex, would handle initial reconnaissance with their enhanced speed and stealth capabilities. The Corvani, Thrak, would provide heavy fire support if the mission went loud. The Altarian, Senna, would manage technical systems and electronic warfare. The Zenthari, Hiss, would coordinate communications. The Vorthan, pilot Jax, would handle extraction. Zeth would provide tactical analysis and real-time strategy updates. "And the human handles precision elimination of key targets," Thrak rumbled, checking his massive plasma cannon. "At least that's what your scores suggest you can do." Elena nodded, but she was already seeing patterns in the mission that the others had missed. The scenario was based on historical conflicts involving the Empire's member species, but it was designed around their known capabilities and standard tactical doctrines. It didn't account for approaches that fell outside established military thinking. The training facility was a sprawling urban environment, complete with multiple levels, defensive positions, and civilian areas that were off-limits for collateral damage. Their target was intelligence stored in a central command bunker, protected by automated defenses and patrol units. As Squad Theta moved into position, Elena studied the defender patterns through her rifle scope. The automated systems followed predictable routines, designed around standard Empire tactical responses. The problem was that standard approaches would trigger alarms long before they reached the objective. "Zeth," she whispered into her communication implant, "your tactical analysis shows 3 possible infiltration routes, but they're all based on conventional doctrine." "Correct. These represent optimal approaches given our known capabilities. What if we used an approach that didn't appear in Imperial tactical databases?" The Nexari's analytical mind processed her suggestion. Elaboration required. Unknown approaches carry unpredictable risk factors. Elena smiled grimly. Sometimes unpredictable is exactly what you need. She outlined her plan to the squad, and the response was immediate skepticism. Instead of using the Rillians for initial reconnaissance, she wanted them to create a distraction on the opposite side of the complex. Rather than avoiding patrols, she planned to eliminate them systematically and make it look like equipment failures. Most controversial of all, she wanted to approach the target through the civilian areas that were supposed to be off-limits. "That's not how this works," Senna protested. "The civilian zones are protected. We can't operate there." "The civilians are holographic projections," Elena pointed out, "and the restrictions only apply to causing them harm. They don't prohibit movement through those areas." Thrak shook his massive head. "Even if that's technically legal, it's not how Imperial forces operate. We follow established protocols. Established protocols that our enemies have studied for generations," Elena countered. "Every major power in the galaxy knows how Imperial forces think and move. That's why they can build defenses like this one." Zeth's neural interfaces flickered as he processed combat data from across the Empire. Analysis confirms human assessment. Imperial tactical doctrine has become increasingly predictable over the past century. Enemy forces consistently anticipate standard approaches. The debate continued for several minutes before Elena made a decision that shocked her squad mates. "Fine, you follow Imperial doctrine. I'll try something different. If my approach fails, you can execute the standard plan." Before anyone could object, she was moving. Elena ghosted through the civilian district, using the holographic crowds as cover while she studied the defensive patterns from an unexpected angle. The automated systems weren't configured to monitor the protected zones, creating blind spots in their coverage. She reached the command bunker's rear access point while the rest of her squad was still positioning for their conventional assault. The security systems here were lighter, designed to prevent civilian access rather than military infiltration. Elena's modified Earth technology found weaknesses in the alien security protocols, exploiting programming assumptions that didn't account for human problem-solving approaches. Within minutes, she had disabled the rear defenses and accessed the intelligence target. As she copied the required data, her communication implant crackled with confused reports from her squad mates. "Target acquired," she reported calmly. "Beginning extraction." "Impossible," Senna transmitted. "You've been gone for 12 minutes. The mission was projected to require at least 45 minutes for completion." Elena was already moving back through the civilian areas, having completed the objective while the defensive systems were still waiting for the attack they expected. "Mission complete. Recommend immediate extraction to avoid compromising future operations." Squad Theta completed their first assessment in record time, but the debriefing session was tense. Colonel Varick studied the mission recordings with obvious confusion, his multiple arms gesturing in patterns that Elena's cultural training identified as deep thought. "Recruit Vasquez," he finally said. "Your approach violated multiple established tactical principles. You operated in prohibited areas, ignored squad coordination protocols, and used methods not found in any Imperial manual." "Yes, sir. But I completed the mission. That's not the point. Military effectiveness requires standardized approaches that can be replicated and coordinated across large forces." Elena stood at attention, but her voice carried quiet conviction. "With respect, sir, standardized approaches only work when you're fighting enemies who don't know your standards. The moment our tactical doctrine becomes predictable, it becomes a liability." The other squad members watched the exchange with growing tension. Elena was essentially challenging the foundational principles of Imperial military training, arguing for an approach that prioritized results over procedure. Varric studied her for a long moment. Your perspective is unusual, Recruit Vasquez. However, your results cannot be disputed. Your squad achieved the highest evaluation score recorded in this scenario. As Squad Theta left the debriefing room, Elena could feel the weight of her squad mates' stares. She had proven that human approaches could achieve superior results, but she had also marked herself as someone who wouldn't conform to established military culture. Zeth approached her as they walked toward their barracks assignment. Your tactical innovations suggest cognitive patterns not documented in Imperial databases. This presents both opportunities and risks. Everything worthwhile involves risk, Elena replied. The question is whether the Empire is ready to learn new ways of fighting, or whether they're more interested in maintaining traditions. Over the following weeks, Elena's question would be tested again and again. 6 weeks into training, Elena had become something of a legend at the War College. Her scores in tactical simulations were consistently the highest recorded, but her methods were so far outside Imperial doctrine that her instructors struggled to classify her performance. She had single-handedly redefined 3 different training scenarios, forcing the college to update their assessment protocols. The breakthrough came during the Siege Warfare module, a notoriously difficult course that had broken countless recruits from warrior species across the galaxy. The scenario was based on the Battle of Kepler 7, where Imperial forces had spent 18 months trying to dislodge entrenched defenders from a heavily fortified asteroid base. Elena stood in the Tactical Planning Center with the other top-performing recruits, studying the holographic display of the fortress. The asteroid had been honeycombed with defensive positions, protected by energy shields and supplied through hidden tunnels. Historical records showed that the Empire had eventually succeeded, but only after massive casualties and resource expenditure. Your mission, announced Major Korath, a veteran Altarian officer, is to plan an assault that reduces casualty projections by 30% while maintaining the same timeline for completion. The other recruits immediately began analyzing conventional approaches. Heavy bombardment to weaken defenses, multi-pronged assaults to divide defender attention, technological superiority to overcome entrenched positions. These were all sound Imperial tactics, proven effective across hundreds of conflicts. Elena studied the data differently. She wasn't looking at the fortress as a target to be overwhelmed, but as a system to be disrupted. Every complex system had dependencies, weaknesses that weren't immediately obvious but could cascade into complete failure if properly exploited. The supply tunnels, she said suddenly, interrupting the planning discussion. Kira, one of the Rillian scouts who had become something of an ally, looked up from her tactical display. What about them? They're too narrow for assault forces and too well defended for infiltration. They're not for assault or infiltration, Elena replied, pulling up detailed scans of the asteroid's internal structure. They're for contamination. The room fell silent as Elena outlined her plan. Instead of attacking the fortress directly, she proposed introducing a targeted biological agent into the supply system. Not a lethal weapon. Imperial law prohibited biological warfare, but something that would systematically degrade the defender's equipment. It's basically an engineered bacteria that feeds on the specific metals used in their weapons and life support systems, she explained to the shocked assembly. Within 72 hours, their defensive capabilities would degrade to the point where a minimal assault force could achieve victory. Major Korath stared at the proposal with obvious alarm. Recruit Vasquez, biological warfare is strictly prohibited under Imperial military law. This isn't biological warfare, Elena countered. It's biological sabotage. The agent doesn't target living beings, only specific manufactured materials. It's no different from using electronic warfare to disable enemy equipment. The distinction is debatable, Korath replied, but Elena could see him working through the implications. Her plan would indeed reduce casualties by more than 30%, probably closer to 90%. The timeline would be shortened to less than a week, and technically, it might not violate Imperial biological warfare prohibitions. Zeth's neural interfaces flickered as he processed the legal and tactical implications. Analysis suggests the proposal exists in a regulatory gray area. Current biological warfare definitions focus on direct harm to living beings, rather than equipment degradation. That's not the point, interrupted Thrak, the Corvani heavy weapons specialist. This kind of thinking is dangerous. Today it's equipment degradation. Tomorrow it's targeting life support systems. Next week it's actual biological weapons. Elena turned to face him directly. The dangerous thinking is assuming that our enemies will limit themselves to tactics we find morally comfortable. Every military innovation looks extreme until the alternative becomes losing the war. The debate that followed revealed a fundamental divide in imperial military philosophy. Most species had joined the Empire after achieving relative peace on their homeworlds. Their military traditions emphasized honor, established protocols, and overwhelming technological superiority. The concept of asymmetric warfare, using unconventional methods to negate enemy advantages, was foreign to their experience. Elena's approach came from a species that had never achieved lasting peace, where military innovation was driven by desperate necessity rather than theoretical optimization. Humans had learned to see warfare as a problem-solving exercise where the only rule was winning. Let's test it, Major Korath finally decided. We'll run the simulation with your biological sabotage approach and compare results to conventional assault plans. The results were staggering. Elena's plan reduced projected casualties by 87%, shortened the operational timeline by 73%, and required 60% fewer resources. The biological agent worked exactly as predicted, systematically degrading defender equipment until their positions became untenable. But the real shock came when Colonel Varix reviewed the simulation data. "Recruit Vasquez," he said during the post-exercise briefing. "Your approach achieved superior results, but it raises questions about the broader implications of human tactical thinking." "Sir? Our intelligence services have identified 17 ongoing conflicts where conventional imperial approaches have stalled. Your biological sabotage concept could be adapted to resolve most of these situations within weeks rather than years." Elena nodded slowly, beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had demonstrated. The Empire's military effectiveness was limited by their adherence to established doctrines. Human tactical innovation could multiply their capabilities exponentially, but it would require abandoning many of the principles that defined imperial military culture. "There's another issue," Varix continued. "We've reviewed historical human conflicts and found evidence of similar unconventional approaches throughout your species' military development. Gas warfare, submarine attacks on civilian shipping, strategic bombing of population centers, nuclear weapons deployment. Your species appears to have consistently chosen effectiveness over established military conventions. When survival is at stake, conventions become luxuries," Elena replied carefully. "My species learned that losing honorably still means losing." "Indeed. Which brings us to the central question. Can the Empire integrate human tactical innovations without abandoning the moral frameworks that define our civilization?" It was a profound question that went far beyond military training. The Empire prided itself on being a civilized alternative to the chaos that had defined galactic politics for millennia. Their military strength came partly from superior technology, but also from moral authority that encouraged species to join willingly, rather than resist conquest. Elena's innovations threatened that balance. Her methods worked, but they challenged assumptions about acceptable warfare that had kept the Empire stable for centuries. If humans could teach the Empire to fight more effectively, they could also teach it to become something more ruthless. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted. The Empire's moral framework is admirable, but it only works as long as your enemies share similar values. The moment you face an opponent who prioritizes victory over convention, your adherence to established rules becomes a disadvantage." Elena pulled up intelligence reports on several border conflicts where Imperial forces had struggled against unconventional opponents. These conflicts have dragged on for years because Imperial doctrine doesn't account for enemies who fight dirty. You're trying to win clean wars against opponents who understand that the only rule in warfare is winning. Varix studied the data with growing concern. Elena was right. The Empire's military effectiveness was increasingly compromised by their reluctance to adapt to unconventional threats. But accepting human tactical innovations would mean transforming the Imperial military into something fundamentally different. Your insights are valuable, Recruit Vasquez, he finally said. Perhaps too valuable. We'll need to determine how to integrate human capabilities without compromising Imperial values. As Elena left the briefing room, she realized she had reached a critical turning point. Her performance at the War College had exceeded every expectation, but it had also marked her as someone who could change the Empire's approach to warfare. The question was whether the Empire was ready for that change, and whether Elena was prepared for the consequences of teaching a galactic superpower how to fight like humans. The Empire thought they were training an exceptional sniper. They were actually discovering that they had recruited a representative of the most militarily innovative species in the galaxy. The real test wouldn't be whether Elena could master Imperial doctrine, but whether the Empire could master the implications of human military thinking. 3 months after arriving at the War College, Elena received orders that surprised even her instructors. Instead of completing the standard 18-month training program, she was being fast-tracked to active duty with the Imperial Special Operations Command. Her final assessment would be a real mission, a hostage rescue operation that had already claimed 2 previous Special Forces teams. The briefing took place in a secured chamber deep within the college's intelligence section. Admiral Kresh, a imposing Vorlothian with scales that seemed to absorb light, presided over the meeting. His species was known for their tactical brilliance and absolute pragmatism, making them natural leaders of special operations. Situation: 15 Imperial diplomats held hostage on Tekan Prime by separatist forces, Kresh began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life-and-death decisions. Previous rescue attempts failed due to the rebels' defensive positions in an underground facility with multiple redundant security systems. Elena studied the holographic display showing the target complex. The rebels had chosen their position, an abandoned mining facility with natural choke points, limited access routes, and extensive tunnel networks that provided multiple escape paths. Conventional assault tactics had failed because the defenders could simply fall back deeper into the complex, using the hostages as shields. Intelligence indicates the separatists are expecting another conventional assault, Kresh continued. They've reinforced their defensive positions and increased hostage security protocols. Standard Imperial doctrine suggests a siege approach, but political considerations require immediate action. Admiral Kresh's multiple eyes focused on Elena. Your tactical innovations have attracted attention at the highest levels of Imperial command. This mission will serve as your final assessment and, potentially, as a proof of concept for expanding human tactical integration throughout the Empire. Elena felt the weight of that statement. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a test of whether human military thinking could solve problems that had defeated established Imperial approaches. Success would open doors for her species throughout the galactic military structure. Failure would confirm suspicions that human methods were too unpredictable for reliable military use. What assets are available? She asked. 1 special operations shuttle, a 4-person team of your choosing from current War College students, and standard Imperial equipment. No heavy weapons, no orbital support, and no backup if the mission goes wrong. Elena nodded, already formulating her approach. The previous teams had failed because they had tried to fight their way through the facility's defenses. She needed to find a way to bypass those defenses entirely, extract the hostages without triggering a massacre, and escape before the rebels could mount an effective response. For her team, Elena chose carefully. Zeth would provide tactical analysis and rapid adaptation to changing circumstances. Kira would handle reconnaissance and rapid movement through complex terrain. Pilot Jax would manage their insertion and extraction. Most importantly, she requested Senna, the Altarian technician whose electronic warfare capabilities would be crucial for her plan. You're not including any heavy combat specialists, observed Major Korath during team selection. Previous missions failed partly due to insufficient firepower. Previous missions failed because they approached the problem as a combat scenario, Elena replied. I'm approaching it as a magic trick. The analogy confused her instructors, but Elena's team understood immediately. Magic tricks worked by misdirection, making the audience focus on one thing while the real action happened elsewhere. Elena planned to give the rebels exactly what they expected to see, while accomplishing something completely different. The mission began with what appeared to be another conventional assault. Elena's team approached the facility through the main access route, using standard Imperial tactics that the rebels would recognize immediately. As expected, the defenders consolidated their positions to repel the anticipated attack. What the rebels didn't know was that Elena had spent weeks studying the geology surveys of Tikon Prime. The mining facility sat above a network of natural caves that connected to several other mining operations across the region. While the rebels focused on defending against the apparent assault, Elena and Senna slipped into the cave system through an entrance 15 kilometers away. "This is insane," Senna transmitted as they crawled through a passage barely wide enough for their equipment. "These caves could collapse at any moment." "The geological surveys show stable conditions," Elena replied, consulting her modified scanner. "Besides, insane is exactly what makes it work. No reasonable military commander would attempt this approach." They spent 6 hours navigating the underground maze, using Senna's technical skills to bypass the facility's underground security sensors. When they finally reached the holding area where the hostages were kept, Elena's plan shifted into its second phase. Instead of immediately attempting a rescue, Elena began systematically sabotaging the facility's infrastructure. She introduced software viruses into their security systems, planted microcharges on critical support structures, and contaminated their water supply with a harmless but foul-smelling compound that would create the impression of a chemical attack. "What are you doing?" Senna whispered as Elena planted her fifth sabotage device. "We should be extracting the hostages." "Patience," Elena replied. "The hostages are only safe as long as the rebels think they have the advantage. I need to change their threat assessment." Over the next 2 hours, the facility began experiencing system failures that seemed random, but were actually carefully orchestrated. Security cameras malfunctioned in specific sequences. Power fluctuations disrupted communications. Strange smells and sounds suggested that the complex itself was under some kind of attack they couldn't identify. Elena monitored the rebels' communications through Senna's electronic warfare equipment, watching their confidence erode as their supposedly secure facility demonstrated unexpected vulnerabilities. The psychological pressure was exactly what she had intended. The rebels were beginning to question whether their position was as defensible as they had believed. The final phase began when Elena contacted the rebel leadership directly through their own communication system. "This is Imperial Special Operations," she announced, her voice electronically disguised. "Your facility has been compromised by selective infrastructure attack. You have 30 minutes to release the hostages and surrender before we implement total system shutdown." "Impossible," the rebel commander replied. "No Imperial forces have penetrated our defenses." "Check your eastern surveillance sector," Elena suggested. When the rebels looked, they found 3 security cameras that had been systematically disabled in a pattern that spelled out "surrender" in Imperial standard. It was a small detail, but it demonstrated capabilities they hadn't anticipated. "You have 28 minutes, Elena continued. "Consider your options carefully." What followed was exactly what Elena had predicted. Faced with evidence that their supposedly impregnable facility had been comprehensively compromised by forces they couldn't see or fight, the rebels began questioning everything they thought they knew about their situation. Their confidence collapsed, replaced by the kind of paranoia that made rational decision-making impossible. Within 20 minutes, they released the hostages and requested surrender terms. Elena's team extracted the diplomats through the same cave system they had used for infiltration, while the rebels waited for Imperial forces that were still 15 kilometers away, preparing for an assault that would never come. The debriefing session lasted 6 hours as Admiral Kresh tried to understand exactly what Elena had accomplished. Her mission report described an approach that was simultaneously brilliant and completely outside established military doctrine. "You achieved a perfect mission outcome with 0 casualties," Kresh noted. "But your methods relied heavily on psychological manipulation and infrastructure sabotage rather than conventional force." "The best victories are the ones where you never have to fight," Elena replied. "Conventional force would have resulted in dead hostages and dead soldiers. Psychological pressure achieved the same objective without the casualties." "Indeed. However, your approach required extensive preparation, detailed intelligence, and techniques that couldn't be easily replicated by other Imperial forces. Elena nodded. That's the challenge with human tactical thinking. We don't fight by templates or standard procedures. Every situation requires custom solutions based on specific circumstances. Admiral Kresh studied her for a long moment. Which brings us to your next assignment. Imperial intelligence has identified a situation that requires exactly this kind of innovative thinking, a problem that has resisted conventional solutions for over 2 years. Elena felt a mixture of anticipation and concern. Her success at the Yao War College had proven that human military thinking could achieve remarkable results, but it had also marked her as someone capable of operations that pushed the boundaries of Imperial military doctrine. What's the mission, sir? There's a rebellion in the Outer Rim that's been systematically defeating Imperial forces using tactics we don't recognize. Their leader appears to be using strategic approaches that don't match. 2 weeks later, Elena found herself aboard a disguised freighter in the Outer Rim, approaching the contested Zeller system where the mysterious rebellion had established its stronghold. Intelligence reports painted a picture of a conflict unlike anything in recent Imperial history. A technologically inferior force, systematically defeating Imperial units through tactics that seemed to anticipate every conventional response. Her cover identity was that of a human mercenary seeking employment with anti-Imperial forces. It was a role that required her to suppress everything. The War College had taught her about proper military bearing and instead project the kind of dangerous competence that would attract rebel recruiters. The freighter Maverick's Run docked at Zeller Station, a ramshackle trading post that served as neutral ground for various criminal and political organizations. Elena disembarked carrying only her personal rifle case and a data pad, containing fabricated credentials that portrayed her as a former Earth military specialist who had left Imperial service under questionable circumstances. The station's cantina was exactly what she expected, a dimly lit establishment filled with beings from across the galaxy, most of whom were involved in activities that would interest Imperial law enforcement. Elena took a seat at the bar and ordered a human-compatible alcoholic beverage, letting her presence become known while she studied the crowd. It didn't take long for someone to approach her. A scarred Corvani with military bearing and suspicious eyes settled onto the adjacent stool, ordering his own drink before speaking in carefully neutral tones. "Word is there's a human on station looking for work," he said without looking at her directly. "Word travels fast," Elena replied, maintaining the same casual tone. "I'm guessing you might know people who need specialized services. Depends on the specialization. A lot of people claim to be experts at things they've never actually done." Elena opened her rifle case just enough to reveal the modified earth weapon inside. Long-range precision work, the kind that needs to be done right the first time. The Corvani's eyes widened slightly as he recognized the sophisticated technology integrated into the weapon's design. "That's some serious hardware." "Custom work?" "Personal modifications. Earth military training plus Imperial technology equals solutions for problems other people can't solve." "Interesting combination." The Corvani finished his drink and stood. "There might be someone who wants to meet you." "Interested?" Elena nodded, and the Corvani led her through the station's maze of corridors to a secured section that required multiple identity verifications. The level of security impressed her. Whoever ran this operation understood operational security better than most criminal organizations. She was brought to a small conference room where a figure waited in the shadows. When he stepped into the light, Elena felt a shock of recognition that she carefully concealed. The rebel leader was human. Captain Marcus Chen. He introduced himself, studying Elena with eyes that held the same tactical intelligence she had seen in Earth's Special Forces veterans. Former United Earth Colonial Marines, according to my sources. Specialized in asymmetric warfare and unconventional tactics. Elena maintained her cover persona, but her mind was racing. Chen's service record would have made him one of Earth's most effective military commanders. More importantly, his tactical background explained everything about the rebellion's success against Imperial forces. "Elena Vasquez," she replied. "Former Earth Army Special Forces. I heard you might have use for someone with my skill set." Chen smiled, but his eyes remained calculating. "Indeed. We've been quite successful against Imperial forces. But we're always looking for talented individuals who understand that conventional warfare is just one approach among many. Over the next hour, Chen outlined the rebellion's organization and objectives. They weren't simply anti-imperial terrorists. They were representatives of several species that had been conquered rather than choosing to join the empire. Their goal was to demonstrate that imperial military supremacy wasn't absolute, hoping to inspire wider resistance movements. The empire's strength comes from the assumption that resistance is futile, Chen explained. They've grown complacent because most species surrender rather than fight. But complacency creates vulnerabilities. Elena listened as Chen described tactics that were clearly based on Earth military doctrine adapted for galactic warfare. Hit-and-run attacks that negated imperial technological advantages. Intelligence networks that provided advance warning of imperial movements. Psychological warfare designed to undermine imperial confidence. You've been quite effective, Elena observed. Intelligence reports suggest imperial forces haven't been able to establish reliable control in this sector. Intelligence reports are correct. We've made this region too expensive for the Empire to hold. Without committing resources they need elsewhere. Chen activated a holographic display, showing the tactical situation across the outer rim. Imperial forces controlled major population centers and strategic resources, but large areas remained contested. More importantly, the rebellion's success was inspiring similar movements in other regions. The Empire's problem, Chen continued, is that they're trying to fight a political war using purely military solutions. You can't defeat an idea with superior firepower. Elena recognized the strategic thinking immediately. Chen was applying classical Earth counterinsurgency principles in reverse. Instead of trying to win hearts and minds, he was demonstrating that the Empire's protection came with unacceptable costs. "Where do I fit into your organization?" she asked. "We need someone who can handle precision operations that require human tactical thinking. The Empire has been adapting to our general approach, but they still don't understand specific human capabilities." Chen handed her a mission briefing that made Elena's blood run cold. The rebellion planned to assassinate Admiral Kresh during his upcoming inspection tour of Imperial installations in the region. It was exactly the kind of high-profile operation that would demonstrate Imperial vulnerability while eliminating one of their most effective commanders. "This is ambitious," Elena said carefully. "Kresh is one of their best strategic minds, which is exactly why he needs to be eliminated. His tactical innovations have been countering our operations more effectively than previous Imperial commanders." Elena found herself in an impossible situation. Chen's rebellion was using human military doctrine to challenge the Empire's stability, threatening to unravel the galactic order that had brought peace to billions of beings. But the Empire's response would likely involve massive retaliation that would cost countless innocent lives. "I'll need to study the target profile and develop an operational plan," she said, buying time to figure out how to handle the situation. "Of course, but understand that this operation is time-sensitive. Kresh's inspection tour begins in 72 hours. Elena spent the next day studying Chen's intelligence files on Admiral Kresh while trying to determine her best course of action. The rebel leader's tactical brilliance was undeniable, but his methods threatened to destabilize the relative peace that the Empire had maintained for centuries. The real revelation came when she discovered Chen's true motivation. His homeworld had been one of the last to resist Imperial integration, resulting in a devastating conflict that had cost millions of lives. Chen himself had lost his entire family when Imperial forces targeted civilian infrastructure to break resistance. Elena understood his anger, but she also understood the broader implications of his success. If human military thinking could defeat the Empire, it could also transform the Empire into something more ruthless and effective. The question was whether galactic civilization could survive that transformation. As she prepared for what might be her most important mission, Elena realized she faced a choice that would define not just her own future, but potentially the future of human integration into galactic society. Chen represented what humans could become if they chose conflict over cooperation. Her own path represented the alternative, using human capabilities to strengthen rather than destroy the institutions that maintained galactic stability. The Empire thought they were dealing with an unknown alien threat. They were actually confronting the mirror image of their own new human allies. Forced to choose between embracing human military innovation and fighting against Elena's next decisions would determine whether humanity's introduction to galactic civilization would be remembered as an opportunity for mutual advancement or as the beginning of an era where warfare became more brutal and effective than the galaxy had ever experienced. Elena stood on the observation deck of Zeller Station, watching Imperial ships approach through the viewport while her mind raced through possibilities. Admiral Kresch's inspection fleet had arrived precisely on schedule, unaware that one of the galaxy's most dangerous humans was planning his assassination. What they also didn't know was that another human was about to make a decision that would reshape the balance of power in this sector. She had spent 60 hours analyzing Chen's operational plan, and it was brilliant. Using her established Imperial credentials, Elena would gain access to the flagship during a diplomatic reception. Her position as a War College graduate would provide perfect cover for carrying weapons and moving freely through secured areas. A single precision shot during the Admiral's address to station personnel would eliminate the Empire's most effective counterinsurgency commander. The plan would work. Elena was certain of that, but she was equally certain that its success would trigger consequences that Chen hadn't fully considered. She activated her personal communicator and sent a coded message to Imperial intelligence, using protocols that Admiral Kresch had provided during her mission briefing. The message was brief but carried enormous implications. Package delivered. Ready for extraction. 30 minutes later, Elena was aboard Admiral Kresch's flagship, ostensibly for debriefing about her infiltration mission, but actually to implement a plan that neither the Empire nor the Rebellion expected. Your intelligence on the rebel leadership is concerning, Admiral Kresch said as they met in his private conference room. A human commander explains their tactical innovations, but it raises questions about your species' loyalties. Marcus Chen doesn't represent humanity any more than any single individual represents their species, Elena replied, but his presence here does create opportunities. She outlined her actual plan to Kresch, watching his expression shift from confusion to alarm to grudging admiration as he understood what she proposed to accomplish. You want to use the assassination attempt as bait for a counterintelligence operation, Kresch summarized, but that requires you to maintain your cover until the last possible moment. Chen trusts me because I'm human, and because my credentials are authentic. That trust is our greatest asset for dismantling his entire organization. It's also incredibly dangerous. If your deception is discovered, you'll be killed immediately. Elena nodded. But if it succeeds, we can eliminate this rebellion while demonstrating that human tactical innovation serves the Empire rather than threatening it. Kresch studied her proposal for several minutes, his tactical mind working through the implications. Elena's plan would indeed neutralize the rebel threat, but it would also establish a precedent for how the Empire integrated human military capabilities. This operation requires resources and coordination that go beyond standard counterintelligence protocols, he finally said. If we're going to attempt something this ambitious, we need to ensure absolute success. Over the next 12 hours, Elena and Kresch developed a complex operation that would unfold in 3 phases. First, Elena would maintain her cover and provide intelligence on rebel positions and capabilities. Second, she would sabotage the assassination attempt while appearing to execute it successfully. Third, she would lead Imperial forces to rebel strongholds, using her inside knowledge to neutralize their leadership before they could escape. The diplomatic reception proceeded exactly as Chen had planned. Elena arrived in formal dress that concealed her disassembled rifle, moved through security checkpoints using her legitimate Imperial credentials, and positioned herself with a clear line of sight to the podium where Admiral Kresch would address station personnel. What Chen didn't know was that Admiral Kresch was wearing advanced personal armor beneath his dress uniform, that Elena's rifle had been loaded with non-lethal training rounds, and that Imperial security teams were positioned to capture rather than kill the rebels who had infiltrated the station. As Kresch began his address, Elena raised her rifle and fired a single shot that struck the Admiral's center mass. He collapsed convincingly, artificial blood packets creating the appearance of a fatal wound while his armor absorbed the impact. Emergency alarms sounded as security forces responded to the apparent assassination. Elena escaped through predetermined routes, meeting Chen's extraction team with perfect timing. As far as the rebels knew, their operation had succeeded brilliantly. Admiral Kresh was dead, Imperial forces were in chaos, and their human sniper had proven herself capable of extraordinary precision under pressure. "Outstanding work," Chen said as they regrouped at a hidden facility on Zeller Station's lower levels. "Kresh's death will paralyze Imperial operations in this sector for months." Elena played her role perfectly, accepting congratulations while mentally preparing for the operation's second phase. Unknown to Chen, Admiral Kresh was very much alive and coordinating with Imperial forces who were now moving into position around every rebel safehouse and supply depot. The rebellion's celebration lasted exactly 6 hours. Then Elena triggered the collapse of their entire organization. It began with communications intercepts that she provided to Imperial forces, revealing the locations of rebel command centers. Then came intelligence on supply lines that enabled Imperial forces to cut off the rebellion's logistical support. Finally, Elena led strike teams to capture rebel leadership before they realized their organization had been compromised. Chen's capture was almost anticlimactic. Elena simply activated a locator beacon during their final planning session, and Imperial Special Forces arrested him within minutes. His shock at discovering her true loyalty was complete. "Your Imperial intelligence," he said, as restraints locked around his wrists. "How long have you been working against us?" "Since the beginning," Elena replied. "My mission was always to infiltrate and neutralize your organization. But you're human. You should understand what the Empire has done to conquered species." Elena studied him with something approaching sympathy. "I understand what you've done to innocent beings in the name of resistance. The Empire isn't perfect, but it's better than the chaos that preceded it." Chen's expression hardened. "You've betrayed your own species." "I've served my species' interests by proving that humans can be trusted with responsibility in galactic civilization. Your approach would have made humanity a threat to be contained rather than allies to be valued." The aftermath of Operation Mirror Strike, as it came to be known in Imperial records, had far-reaching consequences. The rebellion's collapse eliminated organized resistance in the Outer Rim. But more importantly, it demonstrated that human tactical innovation could serve Imperial interests, rather than threatening them. Elena's promotion to Lieutenant Colonel came with assignment to the newly created Human Integration Division, tasked with developing training programs that would spread human tactical thinking throughout Imperial forces. Her War College innovations became standard curriculum, while her operational methods were studied and adapted for use by other species. But the real victory was subtler. Elena had proven that humanity could be trusted with positions of significant responsibility within Imperial power structures. Her loyalty during the most challenging circumstances had earned her species political capital that would benefit human colonies throughout the galaxy. Admiral Kresh, whose death and resurrection had become legendary throughout Imperial military circles, summarized the operation's significance during Elena's promotion ceremony. "Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez has demonstrated that the most dangerous humans are not those who fight against civilization, but those who choose to fight for it. Her tactical innovations will make the Empire stronger, while her loyalty has proven that humanity deserves a place among the galaxy's most trusted species." Elena stood at attention during the ceremony, but her thoughts were on the future. Humanity had passed its first major test in galactic politics, proving they could be partners rather than threats. But she knew this was only the beginning. Other challenges would arise, other tests would come. The Empire had welcomed a human sniper and discovered they had recruited something much more valuable, a species capable of innovation that could strengthen rather than threaten galactic civilization. Elena's kill count would continue to grow, but now it would be in service of building rather than destroying the institutions that brought peace to billions of beings across the galaxy. As she accepted her new rank and responsibilities, Elena smiled grimly. The galaxy thought it understood human capabilities now. They had no idea what humans could accomplish when they were truly committed to protecting something they valued. The real story was just beginning.